Welcome, everyone. My name is Alvin Rosenfeld. I teach at Indiana University and head up our university's Institute for the Study of Contemporary Antisemitism. It's my pleasure to welcome you to today's session, which is the first of three devoted to online antisemitism before and after October 7th. That date, of course, signifies a great deal to all of us. We're one day away from the first anniversary of the horrors of October 7th and an outbreak of anti-Semitism almost unrivaled in recent years. Our speakers today, and I'll introduce them in just a minute, will be speaking specifically about online anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism waxes and wanes over time. It takes different forms in different times in different places, especially in an age of social media. Hate speech of various kinds, including anti-Jewish hate speech, has become very intense, very pervasive, and has the potential to be very destructive. My three colleagues, Günther Jikeli, Katerina Zermer, and Damir Chalvar, are experts in tracking and analyzing online anti-Semitism. Today's program will be devoted to that in particular. It's the first of three. In a couple of weeks, Professor Chalvar will himself head up another program of this kind. A word or two about our three participants. Günther Jikeli is my friend and close colleague at Indiana University. He's been trained as both an historian and a sociologist with a specialization on modern Europe, particularly hatreds of various kind, and most prominently anti-Semitic hatreds. He works closely with me in IU's Institute for the Study of Contemporary Antisemitism. He's a faculty member in the Department of Germanic Studies and the Jewish Studies program, and he leads our university's research lab on social media and hate. Although a young scholar, he's already a widely published scholar. I won't right now take time to mention all of his publications, but they include a recently edited book, The Return of Religious Anti-Semitism, and a book he published in 2015 on European Muslim anti-Semitism. We can look to him for much more in the future. As we can as well for Katerina Zermer. Katerina holds a master's degree in sociology and social research with a focus on quantitative methods. She did her studies at the University of Bremen, where she also studied computer science. She joined our social media and hate research lab in 2020. She's been an affiliate scholar with us since 2021. We had the pleasure of having her here for 9 months as a visiting scholar in 2022, and she's been serving actively and effectively as the research lab's data analyst and project manager. We look forward to retaining close working ties with you, Katerina. Damir Chalvar is another one of our colleagues based here in Bloomington. He's an associate professor at Indiana University, where he teaches and does research in the domains of computational linguistics, natural language processing, and artificial intelligence using classical and quantum computing. At IU, he directs the NLP lab and the quantum NLP study group, and a great deal more. Enough from me. It's now my pleasure to hand over to Günther, Katerina, and Damir. We can look forward to a very well-informed and important conversation with them.
Thank you, Alvin, for the generous introduction. Welcome everybody to today's workshop on online anti-Semitism before and after October 7th. We're honored to present to you some of the results from our social media research lab at IU's Institute for the Study of Contemporary Antisemitism. And this webinar is part of our Datathon machine learning competition on anti-Semitism with 3 workshops. The first one is today, as a more general introduction, and then we have a second one next week on the annotation and Datathon side, and the third one with Professor Damit Java on the computational side. So how do you detect automatically anti-Semitic messages in a wider data set? To outline our agenda, let me see if I can move the mouse here. Yes, I can. For today, we will begin with an overview of social media, exploring its mechanisms, significance, and the ways it shapes public discourse, maybe. Following that, we will delve into anti-Semitism, defining what it is and examining its manifestations, particularly in online contexts. We'll present our key findings from the research lab, focusing on trends observed before and after October 7th, a date, of course, that has precipitated a profound shift in global narratives and has triggered a concerning escalation of anti-Semitism online and offline. We will conclude with some insights regarding the implications of these findings for our broader understanding of online anti-Semitism, and we'll open the floor then for a Q&A session. And lastly, there will be a subsequent segment specifically and exclusively for competition participants. Before we dive into the details, it's critical to understand that online antisemitism is deeply influenced by the structure and dynamics of social media platforms. While these platforms are designed to foster connections and engagement, to keep users really watching the screen for advertisement revenue, they can also serve as a powerful vehicle for the dissemination of anti-Semitism and other extremist narratives. With that, let's begin with a short overview by Katharina on some key facts about social media.
I hope you can hear me now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Well, is the presentation ongoing? Yes. Hello, everybody, and thank you for the introduction. I want to give a short overview on why we should research social media. Since we have a very broad public today, some of them being participants from our Datathon, others of you probably being webinar listeners or have been for quite a while, I assume that our audience consists of people that some of them using social media on a daily basis and actively using it, while others of you may have already heard of social media but may not have any accounts yourself. So let's start with asking ourselves why we should actually research social media. And I think it's important to understand that social media is an important part of our society. So if we look on the upper right side, there's a quote saying, swiping through TikTok is a good way for customers to kill time. I believe this is a hard pill to swallow for the ones of you that are not teenagers anymore, but it shows that we have to accept that social media is actually something that is going to be around for a bit. If we look at the numbers, young adults, teenagers from the age 13 to 16, spend a lot of time online. 16 or 17% of them even say they are almost constantly online on TikTok or YouTube. So if we want to understand society or aspects of society or social phenomena like anti-Semitism, we also need to have a look at social media. Now, can I continue to the next slide? Yes. What is social media? That's what I wanted to continue with. This might seem a question that is hard to answer. I looked at a handbook for social media research where I found this quote: social media are web-based services that allow individuals, communities, and organizations to collaborate, connect, interact, and build community by enabling them to create, co-create, modify, share, and engage with user-generated content that is easily accessible. Now, if I look at that quote, I find it sounds quite outdated. So the first takeaway of today, if we analyze social media, is that social media ages quickly. So there are aspects to it, creating and modifying content, sharing content, and engaging with it, that is still very accurate. But there are other aspects where I would say that this definition, which is from 2017, sounds quite old. 2017 was just 1 year after TikTok was founded. So things have changed since then. Generally, what every social media platform shares is that every person, every organization can have an account, and that there are very different intentions why users, why organizations and persons have profiles. So journalists might have profiles because they want to share their findings. Probably many of you have already seen that big news agencies, journals, and broadcasting services usually have social media accounts. Then there are politicians that have social media accounts. The most prominent person using social media was probably Donald Trump. But nowadays, I'd say that the majority of politicians use social media to communicate what they're working on. We have private people using social media to stay in touch with friends or informing themselves. So you see different actors use social media differently. But what is the same to all social media platforms are that they have some features that can be used. Trying to get to the next slide. Günther and I are sharing the screen and sharing the access to it. So if it takes us a bit to reach the next slide, that is just because we are still practicing it, but we'll probably get better over the course of the presentation. The different platforms offer similar features, as I said. So we're looking today a lot at mainstream social media platforms as opposed to fringe social media platforms. Mainstream social media platforms can be X, what was formerly known Twitter, can be Instagram, TikTok. There are some others, but those three are actually very similar to each other. Twitter is a social media platform that is mainly based on text. So if we look at the left side, we see the account of the Institute for the Study of Contemporary Antisemitism that posted an article. If we look in the middle, we see a screenshot of Instagram. The profile is of the US women's national soccer team. They just won the gold medals in the Paris Olympics this summer and posted some images. So this is more image-centered about the numbers, how they performed. And then on the right side, let's see if I can actually have it played. Oh no, that does not work. Or maybe it does. Let's see. It is a video. So TikTok is audio and video based. If that video would play right now, we could listen to a song and see cats standing up. It is posted by Taylor Swift. For those who don't know her, she's a somewhat known singer. And what is different from TikTok to Instagram and Twitter is that those are mainly videos, and we also usually hear when we see a post. So as you can see, they differ a bit, but what I highlighted in green is that all of them share features like commenting on posts, liking posts, being able to share posts, either with users of the platform, but also with people outside of the platform, and saving those posts if we wanted to look at them later. Now, after looking at some of those platforms, I want to give one last remark on TikTok, and especially something that we always hear is the TikTok algorithm. So at least how I perceive it, TikTok is somehow different to other platforms, because when people talk about TikTok, and especially when people talk about the TikTok algorithm, it is oftentimes when they talk about, I just chose some of the articles, hate or radicalization, political extremism. So there seems to be something when looking at the platform of TikTok, what is attributed to the algorithm that is different to other social media platforms. An algorithm is a finite mathematical set of rules that solves a problem. An algorithm does not necessarily have anything to do with social media or with the internet. Algorithms are mathematical functions that have been discovered thousands of years ago. And actually, algorithms are also things that we have in our day-to-day lives. So when we tie our shoes or when we follow a recipe, that's actually just a set of rules that we finish to achieve something. So we'll definitely later talk about algorithms, and I hope that in the discussion we can also find some time to talk about platform policies or the influence of platform on anti-Semitism or vice versa. But I just wanted to have everybody the same understanding of what social media is and especially what an algorithm is. And with that, I hand over to Günther, who's now gonna give an introduction to what anti-Semitism is, to the history of anti-Semitism, and to current anti-Semitism.
Yes, thank you, Katharina. So as we delve into the topic of online antisemitism, it's crucial to begin by establishing a foundational understanding of what antisemitism actually is. Oh, I think there is some interference. Oh, there was? Okay. So to effectively identify antisemitism in our contemporary digital landscape, we must explore its historical context. Katharina, I just muted you because I think there was some interference from your computer or something. So the historical context is important because all these stereotypes and tropes that have been perpetuated and accumulated really over the last at least 2,000 years, they still play a role today. So antisemitism that has really evolved over centuries, often manifesting through deeply ingrained religious and cultural stereotypes. And the religious stereotypes have historically been very powerful tools also of vilifying Jews. And today, both Christian and Islamic references still act as indicators or whistleblowers for current anti-Semitic attitudes. And of course, this is in addition to those stereotypes stemming from nationalist and other more recent ideological movements. However, the first point I want to make is that to recognize and identify antisemitism today in the online sphere, it is vital to understand these references and thus the historical trajectory of antisemitism. And I want to give you an example. So here you see a message that simply says John 8:44, and it shows an image of a horrible creature. Without some historical knowledge, you would not be able to recognize this message as deeply anti-Semitic. Why? Well, let's see. So from the same user, we see other deeply anti-Semitic message. Doesn't take long to find them. Here's a comment on a news item that political commentator Josh Shapiro and the Ukrainian President Zelensky they visited a totally shell plant, and the comment is, I quote, "Stop these Jews before they end the world in a Holocaust." So the idea is the Jews are out to destroy the world. And we find these references to John 8:44 in many other anti-Semitic messages. Here you see on the right side one from a user called Man of Truth, claiming that the synagogue of Satan strikes against Christians while demonizing Israel. And here you see a reference again to John chapter 8, verse 44, in a text that the user made as a kind of short bio on his social media account on the platform Gap. That's a fringe platform that is known for its white supremacist user base. This self-description, saying that Jews are the children of Satan, is, in fact, from the perpetrator of the deadliest anti-Semitic attack in North America since 9/11. So here you see that in the context. In 2018, the murderer went on the Tree of Life synagogue, went to the Tree of Life synagogue in Pittsburgh and murdered 11 people there and wanted to kill as many Jews as possible, as he was quoted. He used the Gospel of John to demonize Jews, and he justified his action as a defense against the Jews who bring in immigrants to his country. So this rhetoric employed by this terrorist is indicative of the pervasive stereotypes that have been weaponized against Jews throughout history, taking fragments of sacred texts, both Christian and Islamic, out of context. So in the Gospel of John, what do we actually have? We have a heated exchange that occurs in which Jesus accused certain Jews of being, there's a quote there, from their father, the devil. While this verse has been historically misused to demonize Jews, it's important to recognize the broader context of this verse. Biblical scholar Harold Attridge has pointed out that such interpretations often overlook counterbalancing messages also coming from John, such as salvation comes from the Jews, and that this particular phrase is part of an account of how Jesus addressed a particular group of fellow Jews who he felt had been plotting against him, at least according to John. But this kind of demonization of Jews is only one of countless tropes and stereotypes from the rich reservoir of this kind of stereotypes that have been growing over the centuries. As we trace the history of anti-Semitism, we can observe distinct periods that have given rise to new accusations against Jews. In early Christianity, Jews were scapegoated as responsible for the death of Jesus, leading to claims that they were inherently evil and were targeted for their religion. In the Middle Ages, anti-Semitism became more and more irrational, and rumors about Jews led to pogroms. The idea of Jewish blood and race appeared during the Spanish Reconquista and Inquisition. Then, during the Enlightenment and the era of nationalism and emerging nation states, the development of national identities raised questions about Jewish loyalty and belonging. Jews were targeted as outsiders of the nation and for their race. And targeting Jews for their race culminated during Nazism in the attempt to completely wipe out the Jewish people and to murder every Jew in the world. And after the Second World War and after the Holocaust, the target shifted again against the Jewish state and against the memory of the Holocaust. So Jews have been targeted in all these periods, and old accusations are not forgotten. They are part of this rich anti-Semitic reservoir and can resurface anytime, and often do so in the online sphere. So this slide presents the most common accusations against Jews throughout different historical periods. So you won't be able to read it, but because there are just too many, and we don't have time to examine each one in detail, this table illustrates how the accusations have frequently been tied to the major real or perceived issues in each of these periods, in each of these eras. And here you see a much simplified version of this, with key accusations against Jews throughout the past 2,000 years. They are all relevant today, sometimes in modernized and secularized forms. Let me read them out to you. So first, Jews were accused of allegedly killing Christ and to work with the devil. Jews allegedly falsified the scriptures and must be subdued to Islam. Then there were rumors of the blood libel and being responsible for pandemics. Jews are allegedly not loyal citizens and don't assimilate or assimilate too much. And the accusations that Jews are greedy and cruel. Jews have been accused of being not really part of the nation, that are fundamentally different and the enemies even of the nation. And there's a Jewish spirit, which is bad for the world. Jews have been accused of being responsible for economic crises and conspiring against nations and the world. And the Nazis then really pushed this idea that not only were Jews evil, but that evil was Jewish. And prominent contemporary accusations on top of all the others are that Jews misuse the memory of the Holocaust and that the Jewish state is evil and Jews are complicit. And you might have noticed already that many of these old stereotypes really resurface today. So all that background we need to know if we want to detect, identify, and analyze online anti-Semitism today. And the automated detection of anti-Semitic messages is still not very accurate. That's why we use a team of annotators with extensive knowledge of these anti-Semitic tropes. They manually annotate samples of online messages, and we can then see trends. So all definitions really have their limitations. The most widely used definition today is the working definition of the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, the IHRA definition. But that's only a one-page document, and it cannot fully capture the complex historical and psychological origins of anti-Semitism, but it can be used as a guide to decide what can be considered anti-Semitic or not. And this IHRA definition that works with examples that can signal potential anti-Semitic intent. And since October 7th, these 3 examples out of 11 that they're using have become especially pertinent. First one is drawing comparisons of contemporary Israeli policy to that of the Nazis. The second one being denying the Jewish people the right to self-determination, for example, by claiming that the existence of a state of Israel is a racist endeavor. And thirdly, holding Jews collectively responsible for actions of the state of Israel. But of course, as always, and as the IHRA definition also stipulates, the overall context has to be taken into account. And we sometimes discuss this in our team. We discuss messages for hours to decide really if they should be considered anti-Semitic or not. And here I briefly want to show you some results of that we got from our annotation project. So we took samples from Twitter, or now X, that are somewhat representative of conversations about Jews and Israel on these platforms. And you see a graph here that shows the share of anti-Semitic messages in conversations that include the word Jews on the platform. Here, all before October 7th, 2023. The share of anti-Semitic messages was between 6 and 20% during these time periods. That, of course, translates to thousands of anti-Semitic messages every day. You can also see 2 clear peaks. One is related to an offline event, the war with Hamas in May 2021. And the other peak starting in fall 2022, that has to do with a number of factors. We actually wrote a lengthy paper on this. These factors include anti-Semitic outbursts of prominent influencers such as Kanye West, and some changes on the platform X after Elon Musk took over the platform. Here you see in this slide, you see the percentage of anti-Semitic messages in conversations with the word Israel, and that ranges from 10 to 30%. Again, there's one peak related to the war with Hamas in May 2021. And here we have also samples from post-October 7th period, showing a clear rise. So at the end of 2023, well over 1 in 4 messages on X that talk about Israel was anti-Semitic. This slide shows a comparison of the share of anti-Semitic messages in top tweets, comparing early September 2023, so before October 7th, and early September of this year, orange being this year, 2024. We use the IRA definition, and if we do that, a quarter of the top tweets in early 23 were anti-Semitic, and this rose to a third of the top tweets in early September of this year. And what I also found interesting is that the share of those tweets that are unambiguously anti-Semitic, that we classified confidently as anti-Semitic, almost doubled. Our research shows that, firstly, anti-Semitism, both online and offline, was already at high levels before October 7th, including also on mainstream platforms, and had been widely disseminated across platforms. And then there were trigger events that often caused spikes in anti-Semitic behavior online. Examples include the COVID-19 pandemic, the May 2021 conflict with Hamas, and anti-Semitic statements by prominent figures like Kanye West. And thirdly, October 7th and the subsequent war in Gaza have triggered yet another wave of anti-Semitism, not only on a larger scale, but with a notable shift in the nature and intensity of its expressions. And we'll talk more about this shift in nature and the new quality that resulted from that. And I hand over again to Katharina.
Thank you. If there are problems with the sound again, please let me know, then I'll try to solve them somehow magically. Before I start talking about what we observed online after October 7 of last year, what we did not observe was, or what probably needs its own webinar, is the lack of empathy that was observable or not observable on social media right after October 7. But what happened? So on October 7, this is one out of many, many posts, is a glorification of the Hamas atrocities. So this post says, Palestinians have the right to resist, whether today or the day after the occupation began decades ago. It's a post by a person on Instagram that has 1.7 million followers. So it's, in the language of social media, probably a prominent figure. And we have seen this kind of glorification since October 7 last year. So this is a post that immediately on October 7 was posted. Ironically, they put a peace sign, that's the emoji on the lower right side, right under their post, which is actually contradictory to what they write in the text. A second observation we made just right after October 7, and I'm trying to get to the next slide, here, is that many people just all of a sudden started talking about Israel and Palestine, started talking about the content, about the conflict. So accounts that never posted any political post before, somehow in October of last year began shifting their content. And the first example that I chose for that is a person that has 12,000 followers on Instagram and 33,000 followers on TikTok. The two images on the left are two screenshots from, one is from early October last year, and the second one is even from October 7th last year, that says, "Get ready with me for dinner in New York City." We see it's a person putting on makeup. And on the right side, that is a post that was then posted on October 11 last year, where they say, and I hope you can read it, "Next time you find yourself questioning how people allow things like slavery or the Holocaust or the genocide of Armenians happening and said nothing." And then continues going on that now is the time to say something about Palestine. Below you can see hashtags that are Palestine and Free Palestine. This user then, even some month later, still trying to figure out how I change the slides. This user some month later then, or over the course of months and has ever since, started posting, I'd say, a lot of content somehow defending Hamas. So what we see here is a post where she starts saying, "Do you know how Hamas is different from ISIS?" And then later continues, "Hamas seeks to establish a Palestinian state that will be just like any other state." So we see, on one hand, the videos continued the same, so she's putting on makeup, but she kind of added a layer to it, which is the audio. So this is, again, important to understand. TikTok is not only video, but also audio, where she talks about Hamas and spreads anti-Semitism and misinformation. For this particular case, I just chose two quotes from the Hamas Charter from 1988. One is saying, "Our struggle against the Jews is very great and very serious. It need all sincere efforts." And the other one is saying, "In face of the Jews' usurpation of Palestine, it is compulsory that the banner of jihad be raised." So we see what she actually says about Palestine or Hamas wanting to establish a Palestinian state, just like, I quote, "any other state." That is definitely not the case. What we also see is that those videos get a lot more likes. So the videos I showed earlier, they had something like 100 or 200 likes. This one, like, she has videos with up to, I think, 50,000 likes when she talks about those topics. Günther, can you click to the next slide? Because okay, thank you. A second example for somebody who randomly educates about Israel and Palestine, and I put educate in quotation mark, is this Celine Lila Safadi. She, according to her website, is a designer, creative consultant, entrepreneur, model, and content creator based in Dubai, New York City. We see it does not say political educator on this, but still, on one hand, we find her posting travel videos, video blogs, vlogs on her trip to Ibiza. That is on the left. And on the right, we find her spreading a conspiracy theory about the so-called Ben Gurion project. Next slide, please. The Ben Gurion Canal project was a very famous conspiracy theory on TikTok. We find people talking about it on the left side, putting videos with that seem like they are informative. We see both videos on the left look like they put information about them on it, about the video, no, sorry, about the project. And on the right side, we see people talking more emotionally about it. So we see faces. The person on the left side even says that she's depressed at the moment because of it. Günther, can you go one slide back? Because I think it skipped one slide. Yes, because I just wanted to mention what actually the Ben Gurion Canal project is. So in 1963, a paper was released that says use of nuclear explosives for excavation of sea level canal across the Negev desert. That is an idea to create an alternative to the Suez Canal that connects the Mediterranean to the Red Sea. And on the map on the right side, we see it would have been built through Israel. What's hard to see in the presentation, but if you really zoom at it, you see it would have not crossed Gaza. That was in 1963, and nobody since then ever really talked about it. I put a literature below. There's an article online where you can actually read a bit about this conspiracy theory on TikTok. It's very interesting. Key is it would have needed 520 nuclear explosions to allow building such a canal. And this is actually probably the moment where one realizes that it was never a realistic plan. So 1963 passes, nobody really pays attention to this project or so-called project, but then fall 2023, and now we can go to the next slide. We find the University of TikTok talking about this project. So as I said, on the left side, it seems very objective how they talked about it. On the right side, it seems very personal, but this is something we observed after October 7th. So the spread of conspiracy theory is very easy on TikTok. And then also, and I think maybe we find in the discussion time to talk about social media literacy and what it actually takes to identify videos, even though they have more of a format on the left side, as actually not being confidential sources of information, but just as in this case, a conspiracy theory. Okay, next slide, please. Just as people generally posted about the conflict and people even spread ideas, the conflict is also a great opportunity for people to gain revenue. So TikTok offers something that is called effects or filters. Those filters can be about anything. It can actually be an effect that your face looks more young or more old, or it can be a cat filter, you name it. But there are also many effects or many filters that talk about political topics. In this case, many filters, you see it on the top right, filter for Gaza. So somehow these filters were established and then shared by people believing they do something good for the people in Gaza. How that? You can create revenue on TikTok. I think the critical number is if your effect is shared at least 100,000 times, you are eligible for a program that is called Effect Creator Reward, and then it allows you to gain money with it. So while generally one could say it is very good that people want to raise awareness for a problem or want to collect donations, in many of those cases of those filters, we actually don't know who actually created those effects, where does the money go to. There are some filters where you can see how people post screenshots on where they actually donated the money, but I'd say the vast majority does not provide this. And also people, you can see the interactions like in the lower 3 images, people really feel the urge to be, I'd say, almost part of the conflict and contributing to helping and solving the problem and helping people. So people feel the need to interact with the conflict, and it gets a kind of, I'd call it gamification to be part of this. Next slide, please. The same as I described, that people are willing to just use a harmless filter or a potentially harmless filter on TikTok to do something potentially good. People generally started interacting also with sharing of images. I think this one is the most prominent one for those of you who use Instagram. You've very likely seen it in May 2024. This image has been shared almost 50 million times. It says all eyes on Rafah and is an AI generated image. So people, one might think that is just an image that raises awareness on how the civilian population of Rafah is suffering at the moment. But then if we look closer into the profile, next slide, please, we see that the person that created that image also posted in their stories something that's called Rafah Holocaust, which is a Holocaust distortion. So comparing the situation in Rafah to the Holocaust. And on the right side, war criminal, child killer, and genocide Netanyahu. So child killer, actually, that is, as Günther mentioned, we need to learn, or we need a knowledge of anti-Semitism to being able to interpret actually what we read online. Child killer is a very old anti-Semitic trope called the blood libel about Jews killing children, and is something that is very common when we see people talking about Israel. Next slide, please. Thank you. What leads us to dog whistles? Dog whistles are expressions or even emojis that are not everybody's able to interpret, but those who understand it can read it. The term comes from the dog whistles that can only be heard by dogs, but not by human beings. And so is the idea that an anti-Semitic dog whistle can be understood by anti-Semites, but also by people targeted by anti-Semites, so by Jews. Some of them are very obvious emojis. This is, for example, the shower that refers to the gas chambers in the showers, the cookie that wants to say something is burnt in an oven. I'm going to talk about the red triangle in a bit. Then we have TJD, TND. Those are patterns starting with a T, ending with a dead, which means in this case, total Jewish death, or N is the N word. If we look to the image on the right, it says totally joyful day. That is also actually a dog whistle, because totally joyful day starts with TJD. So that is saying TJD, and we can even, I think it's, yeah, the second hashtag saying TJD. There's well, that is also sound. So again, on TikTok, you have the audio level where people use sounds. Oftentimes this is posted when anti-Semites want to say, oh, Jews are being Jews. So you could imagine a content creator who works in finance and happens to be Jewish, then people will post well under his content saying, oh, there you can see it's proven, talking about the anti-Semitic trope of Jews controlling the financial world. And then there's the Austrian painter that can also be represented by the little emoji of a painter, which of course refers to Hitler. Now, I said I want to explain the red triangle in detail. The post on the left is from X or Twitter. So we see the translation is when Qassam gets angry, and then we see a red triangle. That is the military wing of Hamas. And what's happening, this is a video where we can see how Hamas targets how Hamas marks their targets for their attacks with a red triangle. You can find many of those videos on Twitter. You don't need to go to any fringe platforms to find them. And this is a symbol that is then being used. This is not only an online symbol. Next slide, please. This is also an offline symbol. So that is in an image from DC where you can see Hamas is coming and there's the red triangle above. There are people claiming that the red triangle, of course, is not anti-Semitic, but also stands for the Palestinians' resistance. What we can observe is that around the globe, in many countries, many institutions or places like restaurants and bars, bookshops, whatever, are marked with a red triangle and are being vandalized. So when we look at this image saying Hamas is coming with a red triangle, I would say it's very hard to argue that the right triangle is not an anti-Semitic symbol. And when we look at the videos that Hamas post using this red triangle, it gets even harder to argue. I want to talk about one last point, which is Holocaust distortion and the supporting of the Holocaust that we observed online after 10/7. On the left, we see a user saying the more you learn about Israel, the more they begin to look like Nazi Germany. And this is, Günther mentioned earlier, the IRA definition of anti-Semitism and how this is actually an example of anti-Semitism in this definition. On the right side, that is a post that was posted, I think, on Thursday. There's a person saying Israel created the largest death, I'm sorry, how to read. Israel created the largest death camp in history, and Israel is doing to Palestinians what Germany did to the Jews. And the user even decided to tag the location where he took that video. On the upper right, you can see the location tag Auschwitz-Birkenau. This distortion of the Holocaust is something that has been very prominent, I'd say, and people have really used it a lot. Where I want to end with my presentation, and that is the last slide, and maybe also going back to what I initially said about platform policies and about the algorithm. If we look at this anti-Semitic post distorting the Holocaust, we can also look at the comment section. So since social media is a platform of interaction, people post something and people react to it. And if we look at the comment section, the first comment is, wish Germany had finished what they started in World War II, world peace. That is a blatant anti-Semitic comment saying, I wish, or the person wishes that Germany had actually finished killing all the Jews, because then now there would be a world peace. There are many people endorsing what the person does, paying respect, saying it's powerful, talking about courage. So this is just to remember that the much that we can talk about an algorithm and about content being pushed or not by social media platform, it still takes people to post anti-Semitic content, anti-Semitic tropes, and hate on social media. And we cannot attribute everything to the platform. We also need to see that, and this is the same as for offline anti-Semitism, it takes an anti-Semite to say something anti-Semitic.
Thank you, Katharina. So now we're coming to the end and the conclusions. As you've seen, it is very rich in data. If you start looking into social media and trying to make sense of all the anti-Semitic messages that you quickly see there, what can we actually say? It can go in many directions, but one thing I think we can say is that social media is really a game chamber for anti-Semites. It facilitates massive and interactive dissemination of rumors. It can radicalize and self-radicalize anti-Semites. The content is really unlimited, not as in previous times where you had sometimes to seek out and actively go to places where you find this content. And it connects anti-Semites and potential anti-Semites across ideological and geographical boundaries. And we conclude that the widespread dissemination of anti-Semitism online was there before and set the stage really for the current surge of anti-Semitic mobilization and really incitement to violence that we see. We're seeing increased content sharing among the far left, the far right, Islamists, and even mainstream users. These boundaries get more and more blurred. A uniting element is not only the demonization of Zionists, but calls for action against Zionists, whatever they understand with this term. And this marks a shift really from social anti-Semitism to political anti-Semitism, described by Bernard Harrison, who wrote a really great book about this, as the prejudice of panic. So political anti-Semites are revolutionaries or pseudo-revolutionaries who seek redemption really in the murder of Jews. And there we can explain some of what we've seen after October 7th. So this escalation of anti-Semitism that we see in many spaces, but definitely also in the online spaces, must and also can be disrupted. And the first thing, of course, if you want to fight something, you need to name the problem, identify the content, the anti-Semitic content here, and our Datathon might be a modest contribution to that effect. And we will hold a 20-minute session then exclusively for competition participants after the Q&A that we're going to have now.